everyone, and welcome to the Dissecting Liberty podcast. I'm joined, as always, by Cotton.
Howdy.
And then this week, we have a special guest. No, we don't. It's just us two. That was a bad joke. Anyway, poorly executed, definitely not planned. But anyway, we're just going to be talking about some of the thoughts and stuff that we've been having lately, just in regards to how to move forward with how to see liberty come to fruition at some point in the future. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, I'm going to let Cotton take it away because he's got some thoughts. So
I always got thoughts, dude. I'm surrounded by thoughts. So, like, before I really get into it, I do need to mention that I have really been enjoying Birds episodes with Pete, Free Man Beyond the Wall. Have you been listening to those?
Yeah.
They have sent me down some interesting rabbit holes, and also I've been reading a lot of Nietzsche lately for a different reason. But and that has really got me thinking about different things and making me think about like concepts I already hold differently. It's made me kind of approach things from a different direction, I guess. And
yeah.
So I got to say that those episodes and like the thinkers he's been talking about have really permeated a lot of what conclusions I've come to or paths I've gone down. So I was thinking about this earlier and how to conceptualize it, and I think, and this is something like Jordan Peterson used to talk about, but recently it wasn't spurred on by a single event, just kind of a culmination of different things. Recently, I feel like I was going down a path, and I got to a certain point down that path when I realized, hey, I had a wrong turn. You know, I have to turn around and go back and go down a different path to get to the destination, which is liberty, or at the very least, spreading the ideas of liberty and making more people receptible to liberty, right?
Yeah.
And so part of that was realizing that economics is not the end all that people in our community think it is. And I know, like, it's been a joke recently on Twitter that economics is fake, and like, and this is a sign of like where, like, the change that's happened to me, because like a year ago that joke would have upset me, not because like I think because I thought, you know, hey, you know, that's funny and everything, but there are people that genuinely believe that, and I'm not sure it's a good idea to make that joke like strategically, you know.
Right.
And to have agorists making that joke. I don't like, I would have an issue with that, like logistically for like spreading the message. But, like now I think it's funny because it's just part of it's like, it's spreading a bit of chaos into like narrative creation. And I think that's good because that's just like combating, narrative creation in itself. And this is interesting. I say narrative creation. I hadn't really thought about that before. You know, I think part of the reason why the Libertarian Party is just such a joke is because it's playing according to the rules made by people that expressly do not want people like the Libertarian Party to succeed, right? Like the Republicans and the Democrats wrote the rule book in so many words, and So, like, you play that game, you're just not going to win. Like, there's not going to be a libertarian president. Like, and that wouldn't do any good anyway. I mean, people voting for, this is a tangent, but people voting for Gary Johnson to be, or I think an even better example is Jo Jorgensen. People voting for her to be president, genuinely thinking that they can take some states and eventually down the road, the end goal. Yeah. And the end goal is to.
People really think that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, there are people in the LP that are like, all right, so here's what we do. If we canvass these so-and-so states and we can take Nevada or something. And then they see that as a stepping stone to eventually getting a libertarian president, right? But that is obviously back to like you're playing the game. It's like, I think this is a large issue with conservatives, and I promise I'm getting to the point, but I'm kind of thinking chaotically a bit freeform, I guess. But like part of the a really great example of what I'm trying desperately to say is Porter's tweet a while back, where he said conservatism is letting your enemy teach your children and then writing National Review articles about why you don't know how you're losing the culture war. Right? That's a great tweet.
Yeah.
But I think that's largely because conservatives and a lot of its conservative ink play by the rules that liberals made, right? Like they're playing the cultural games that liberals invented. Well, you're not going to beat them at that, right? So if we have the LP engaging in this electoral process with the hope of getting a libertarian president, no, you're not going to win, because the rules for that game were made by people that are in direct competition to the LP. So it's not going to happen.
The only way to win is to not play, right?
Yeah, exactly, man. And that's I want to get to that because that's largely like a conclusion I've come to. But like, I think when people make economic arguments, to get back to my original, or try desperately to get back to my original contention before I go off on another tangent. Like when people use economics as like their main argument, right? I think conceptually that is really similar to like what Ben Shapiro does. And I see that. I'm gonna make that the thumbnail for the episode.
Yeah,
I think that's good. Yeah, check if you want to know what we're laughing at, check the thumbnail for the episode. But I think like making economic arguments to like try to convince people is largely like what Ben Shapiro does. He just spits straight facts and logic. There's no emotion in it. But
yeah,
that I think that is like very useful, right? It is definitely something to put in our toolkit of liberty. But just like a real toolkit or any other toolkit we would use for any other end, whether that be grocery shopping or whatever, just any action with a goal, you can't have just one tool. Like if all you have is like a Phillips head screwdriver, you're not going to get very much done in like, replacing a flat tire or building a bookshelf or something. You got to have a legitimate toolkit with different tools for any situation, or most situations at the very least you may envision yourself coming into. So I think making the economic arguments is a tool in the toolkit. But to a lot of people, that is the only tool, right, in their toolkit, or they think they'll need.
Right.
And I think that's a grave mistake.
Oh, yeah.
And, I can hear people saying, and this is something I thought of when I was wrestling with these ideas. I can hear a lot of people saying, well, think of the Ron Paul moment, right? Think about how, like, the impact the Ron Paul Giuliani moment. Think about how much impact that had, where what he did was he just, without any emotionality, right? He just told the cold, hard truths when it came to U.S. intervention overseas.
Yeah.
But I think thinking that he was just telling a cold hard truth, I think that's not incredibly accurate. You know, think about it this way: if a little boy had said to Ron Paul, "Well, you know, your philosophy doesn't answer 9/11. You know, what are you supposed to do at 9/11?" And then if Ron Paul said the exact same speech he did to Giuliani to someone else of like a less powerful stature, you know, it would be disgusting, right? But part of the reason that the Ron Paul Giuliani moment was so special is because of Giuliani.
Right.
You know? Like, I mean, he was standing up to the man, you know, for a lack of a better term. So, and that's a bit of emotion in there. You know, it was emotionally satisfying to see Giuliani get put in his place.
Right.
So it's not. So like that was the main contention I thought people might have with that, or at least like the first, maybe not the main, but I know that popped up in my head. But and the other thing is, I gotta say, I don't know. I don't have all the answers for this. Nor should I be expected to, right?
I mean, I expected you to, but I've been disappointed by you many times.
I live my life to expressly not live up to your expectations. So I'm sorry to break that to you, Zero, but that's the cold hard truth. All right.
All right. I'll just have to deal with that fact.
That's right. How does that make you feel?
Facts over feelings. Yeah. But to speak to what you're saying about how using economics as our only argument is a mistake, recently I tweeted something to the effect of, my wife is becoming more and more anarchist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, she was not at all, like she was not sympathetic at all to my way of thinking, really, when we first met. But like, we've known each other over 2 years at this point, and kind of the way that I got her to be more sympathetic, and then finally just, you know, kind of accept some of my way of thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that I wasn't trying to make factual arguments. What I would do is, like, she's more of an emotional person than I am, and I would just like bring up stuff like personal, or not personal, but individual examples of people that were victimized by the state. Or, you know, she came more from the left, so I would talk about how the government screws over black people with the war on drugs, you know, and kind of it's like Scott Horton says, that you appeal to the left from the left and the right from the right. But you also, you know, you personalize your arguments or your arguments to specific people. And for a lot of people, the economic arguments do not work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And here's, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I think you hit on something really important there when you said that you just like appeal to individual cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like how every liberal, right, will vote for higher taxes, but then the wealthy ones that vote for higher taxes also have an offshore account, you know?
Right.
So, like, I think individually everybody is incredibly sympathetic to what we're saying, you know? part of it is consistency. You know, they're not taught consistency. They're not taught that as a value, and I think that's mainly a parental shortfall, probably.
Yeah.
In a lot of people. But then the other thing is, like, everybody's taught in groups. You know, like, think of probably one of the most important subjects, like, in schooling is history, right? History is important at any stage of life, you know. Studying history, understanding different past events and how they affected outcomes that we're living with today. And, like, think of, at least in my upbringing, whenever I'd go to social studies, which is where we had history, the smallest group that we would ever talk about, right, was country. You know, the smallest group we'd ever talk about in U.S. history is the United States. And anything other than that was just a stepping stone to the United States, which is the end all, you know. Like, if we talk about before the signing of the Constitution, if we talk about what at the time was thought of like the sovereign land of Virginia, you know, well, they don't mention that, right? They mention everything in the context of the sovereignty of Virginia in relation to the eventual signing of the Constitution when the federal government was created, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And I think that there is a concerted effort to get people to not think individualistically, right? That's selfish. You know, that's what people say. Or that's what's taught.
Just, is this a good place for me to interject a quick story?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll make it short. Several years ago, when I was still in college, I went to a leadership conference on the recommendation of one of my professors. Mm-hmm. And, well, first of all, leadership conferences, like, they're just a terrible idea, because everyone that I met there, like, I wouldn't follow into, you know, like, I wouldn't follow through a door. Yeah. Right? They're just, like, complete, you know, everyone is a loser, basically.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's this guy who is like the keynote speaker, and he had this whole list of different attributes. I think it was different attributes of like a leader or leadership or something like that. And one of the or maybe it's a valid anyway, but basically what he was doing was he'd like go through each term, and he'd have everyone raise their hand like, hey, is this like a good thing? Or is this a bad thing? Right. Yeah. So it'd be like, I can't think of an example, but one of the terms that he used was groupthink. And when he asked if that was a positive or a negative in terms of like leadership, everyone raised their hand like that's a positive thing, and I raised my hand as like the negative, and I'm like the only one aside from maybe a handful of others in this big auditorium, and I was just like blown away. I'm like, I was looking at everyone else like, what are you guys even thinking? That's the opposite of leadership. If you if you have groupthink, then like that's
what's the point in having a leader? You know?
Right. Yeah. And so that goes to your point that we're taught to like think in groups and to accept, you know, kind of the prevailing narrative or prevailing ideas.
Yeah.
And it's just really, it's crazy, you know?
Yeah. Well, and then like, I think this is a sign that they know they can't get rid of it, where they will teach individualism, but it's always in relation to the group, right? Like, you want to earn more money so that you can donate more, or you want to earn more money so that you can pay more taxes, because taxes pay for everything we love in this world, like sunshine and rainbows, you know?
Or like a billionaire saying, tax me more.
Yeah. Right.
Like a libertarian will be like, yeah, no, you're just gonna have your accountants and financial advisors have you like wiggle your way out of that one, right? So
yeah. So like I think the answer very basically, and this is not new, certainly not original to me, but I think the answer is individualism, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So again, that's not new. It's been around for a hell of a long time. People saying that's the answer. But so this goes back to what you said a minute ago, which I believe most recently is championed by Curtis Yarvin, which is don't be how does he word it? He says don't be a dissenter or an engager or something like that. Just drop out, right?
Yeah.
And in that is like I think the engaging in the system is most overtly like being a Republican or a Democrat, right? Mm-hmm. Voting for Biden or Trump or whoever is going to be in the next cycle. Which the next cycle will probably be awfully close to Stalin and Hitler or Mussolini, more like it, but I imagine. Or maybe Stalin and Stalin, I don't know. But and then I see dissenting as voting third party, right? Like you're voting against the system.
Right, yeah.
But the issue with that is, like I said earlier, you're playing their game. When you vote for Trump or when you vote for Biden, you're voting for the system. It's maybe like different ends within that system, but it's still the system, right? And then you vote for Joe Jorgensen to modify the system radically. Like when you vote for one of the major two parties, you want to change the system quantitatively. When you vote third party, you want to change the system qualitatively. And then when you drop out, you don't want to engage in the system at all, and you would preferably not have a system, right? And
right.
Like
even by dissenting, you are helping them manufacture consent, like for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know some people, some listeners even have an issue with that. Like that goes to the debate, like is voting violence? I don't know if voting like in total is violence. Definitely some voting is violence, but and then the greater point, which goes way back to like one of the first things we talked about on the podcast, like the social contract theory, is like when you vote, do you give consent? It's like the social contract, like a fundamental idea to like everybody that argues for the social contract. And I don't know. With like voting and giving consent, I lean more to yes. Like when you vote, you are consenting to the system, right? And the outcome of that system you're stuck with. So I guess if you vote for Trump, maybe, I don't know, or Joe Jorgensen or whoever the Green Party candidate is, or Kanye, you're consenting to the system. Thus, the end to that logically is you're consenting to who wins.
Yeah.
Like you're consenting to democracy. Thus, you're consenting to Biden or whoever. So like and then that comes back to the dropping out thing. Like I ought to mention I wrote a little paper. At the moment, I think only 2 people have read it. Zero and someone else that read it. It might get published. The other person that read it works for a publication. I don't want to say what publication, but in case it doesn't get published there. So, but a lot of this comes from this paper I wrote, and I mentioned in the paper a bit that I've gotten, or I might have mentioned this to someone else. I don't remember, but I've gotten a bit more selfish recently, and not selfish in like the definition that like we're conditioned to believe. You know, it's like evil and greedy and whatever. Gordon Gekko in Wall Street, but I think that's his name. Something Gekko.
Yeah, it's Gordon Gekko.
Okay, but like I'm selfish in that. Like, I don't care really who wins the election, right? I think eventually everything's going to end the same. I think almost certainly it would happen at different times. But then there's dissenting arguments to that. But like what I'm thinking about currently, where all the thought that in the past might have been concerned about who wins the election, instead I'm worrying about like securing my personal future, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking about what can I do now to live in the part of the country that I want to live in and have the resources to prepare for an uncertain future in that area. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I'm not concerned with fixing. I'm not in the term is I'm not concerned with polishing a turd, right? Like I don't want to make Louisiana better for me because that's impossible, you know. And that's a good metaphor for like engaging in the system. Like you're not going to be able to make the system work for you. The system like fundamentally cannot work for you. So you're not going to vote it right. So I'm not going to make this situation that I'm in currently that I dislike a lot, you know, this area of the country I live in, the amount of money I'm making, just all of these things that are I perceive as holding me back. So instead of misplacing energy into something that is a what's the term? Like just a like a boondoggle, you know. Like voting, you know, Trump will fix whatever, Biden will fix whatever. No, you know, I'm thinking, what can I do within the system, or without diminishing my future success? What can I do to, at the same time, not diminish my future success while also maximizing my future success? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think what you're saying. Well, yeah, you may need to reword that because it's but I think what you're saying is you want to work like within, like you don't want to do anything illegal, but
like
you want
here's
to.
a metaphor. I got a good metaphor. Like,
all right,
I'm gonna have a driver's license, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a pain in the butt to, you know, go to the DMV every so often.
Yeah.
And hey, you know, like you know what I look like because we went to Childerberg. So I have a full head of hair, I wear glasses, and now I have a mustache, right? In my driver's license picture, I have like a number 2 buzz cut. I'm wearing contacts and I'm clean shaven.
Yeah.
So like I need a new driver's license because it's a pain in the butt. Like if I buy alcohol or something. But then I don't want to go to the place and do it. It's a pain in the butt. But, you know, which is worse, like getting a ticket? You know, getting your car impounded because you don't have a driver's license. So that's what I mean with like working into the system to the point of not diminishing your future success, right? Like not doing things like you got to find that the demarcation line to like what you can get away with and what you can't, you know.
Yeah.
And I know like there's some agorists. Like I don't know if you remember when we were doing the frat thing and we had the frat chat on Discord.
Yes.
You remember that? Like that agorist guy that called everybody not real libertarians because they have driver's licenses.
Yeah, I remember. I don't think I saw it, but I've heard plenty of talk about it.
Like that was so crazy, and I think, and those are the agorists I don't like the dogmatic type. Like I think they are agorists fundamentally, and they don't see agorism as a tool in their toolkit. And
yeah,
and part of all of this has made me, like everything I've said thus far has made me incredibly sympathetic to agorism. Right.
Right.
I read, I don't know if I told you this, but I read the New Libertarian Manifesto recently.
Okay, yeah. Conkin's book, right?
Yeah. And I didn't enjoy it. I mean, it was like, well, you know, I'm sitting in a wooden chair, so it's kind of creaky. It's not, there's not much substance, not gonna lie. And I talked to a bit to Ace about it, Ace Archist on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a big Conkin fan, a big agorist. And he said, yeah, New Libertarian Manifesto is more of a call to action, like it's just an emotional thing, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's like a, I don't know, it's just a very entry level thing. You know, he's throwing terms out there with the intention of people reading it that don't necessarily know those terms, right? So, and apparently in an agorist, what is it called? An agorist primer, he outlines stuff a bit more in depth. So that's next. I haven't read it yet, but like just the idea of counter economics and dropping out is a very agorist idea, and so I really am interested in agorism, and not enough necessarily yet to call myself an agorist, but I've become much more sympathetic to it, and it makes me even more pissed off when I see people like that, like in the frat chat that, you know,
right,
get all upset when you say you have a driver's license. Well, dude, you know, we can't get much done for liberty when we're in prison. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like it's dogmatists, you know, that upset me.
Right. But, yeah.
And then, well, what are your thoughts on agorism?
I love agorism.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I'd call myself that, and I'm not sure why. Probably just because I don't think that. I think it's unlikely that we're going to hit like the mass of people that we would need to like make the counter economics work to the point where the state just dissolves, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, collapses under its own weight. I think that, or I don't think that's going to happen, at least anytime soon, unless something really crazy happens. But, and I've been thinking about this probably since about midway through this, that when you're talking about not caring about stuff that you can't change with the system, right? Like that's kind of like I've been thinking about that some lately, where it's like I just don't care whether it's Biden or Trump who wins, because like I have a garden going. I'm looking at getting chickens. Like,
yeah,
you know, I have my guns. And, you know, like, if something really bad happens, like, none of that's going to save me. But, like, it gives me more of a peace of mind to have more control over my life. And that's what I can control. You know? I can't control who wins the election. I can't control any violence that might generate from whatever result occurs, but I can control how prepared I am for it, and it's just not something that I need to be stressing about, because it's just not, like, it's not helpful.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like, just being like, even if I don't completely buy 100% into the philosophy, like, just that agorist lifestyle mindset is like, it just helps me to be more relaxed, and also, like, it makes me happier, because, like, we're talking about, like, they don't teach you consistency in school and stuff, but some of us, like you and me, and most libertarians, we do care about consistency for some reason. Mm-hmm. And when you're living out your libertarian ideals, like, that's just something that, would make most of us happy, and it makes me a lot happier.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason why, like, you feel weird calling yourself an agorist is because I think largely people calling themselves agorists is kind of silly, because, again, it's a tool in your toolkit.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not, like, I don't know what and maybe I just haven't read enough about it, and maybe Konkin outlines this somewhere, but I don't know what an agorist society would look like. To me, that just sounds, it doesn't sound like, it sounds like just a better word for that would be just anarchism, or just free. And if people say, well, yeah, that's agorism, well, then different people are using different definitions for that word, and we need to figure that out. But I think it's a tool in the toolkit, and it's very useful.
Yeah.
Just like Austrian economics and different cultural things and memes.
I've gotten to the point, I guess, where I don't, like, labels just don't matter as much to me.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't call myself an Austrian. Like, yeah. I largely believe in Austrian, with the, I align myself with, like, Austrian economists largely, but, like, I don't know, I just, maybe if I was, like, that's what I was into, like, that's 100%, mm-hmm. I consume that daily. Maybe that's what I would, maybe I would call myself that. But I just, like, I look at what works, specifically what works for me, and, then after that, I'm just fine with calling myself an anarchist, and that's about it. And, you go from there. But
yeah,
labels are limited in their use.
Yeah. And I think back to, like, individualism, I think that anarchy starts in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then that goes back to, like, don't play within the system. Like, if you are an anarchist who has the end in mind of a free society, and you genuinely think that a step to attain that end is voting for the LP nominee, rather, like, there's a bunch of illogical steps in there that I don't understand
anarchism.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I think part of it is to convince others of a successful ethic is to lead by example. And
Mm-hmm.
you can explain, and I mean, you see this in children, you know, like you can explain something to a very young child very logically and just airtight, you know, but they're not going to understand it, you know, so you got to not only let them figure it out a bit through trial and error, but you have to, again, give them that toolkit. You know, you got to what is it? I had a professor recently tell a story, and this is relevant. He told a story that's in, I forget which Plato dialogue, but this is a very famous thing where Socrates was trying to teach the Pythagorean theorem to a slave, right? And he was like drawing the slave proofs of it, you know, using direct examples. Yeah. And Plato said to Socrates, he said, why are you spending all this time showing the slave proofs when you could just tell them the concept and tell them that this has been proven, and you can get a lot of use with just assuming that it is true. And Plato said, I'm trying to tether it into his mind, right? I'm trying to display real world examples so that the slave will not soon forget it. So it becomes a framework. It is learned. You know, it is not just assumed, it is understood.
Yeah.
And I think that's the right path for anarchists, you know?
Yeah.
I think, and also, like, that's just gonna bring you a lot of inner peace, I think. You know, in this paper I wrote, like, I cite Dexter de la Paz in The Moon is a Harsh Mistress when he's outlining, like, what he calls rational anarchism. And he's basically saying what we're saying, you know. You gotta try to, a direct quote, he says, a rational anarchist knows that not all individuals hold his evaluations, so he tries to live perfectly in an imperfect world.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the best explanation I could give for what I'm thinking currently. And I do think that agorism is a logical next step to that, because, like, within that, there is like a trying to think of the right way to put this. Within that framework are obvious uses of agorism, right? Counter economics.
Yeah.
So I think that is probably the case. I think also the other... Okay, here's a bit of where Nietzsche comes into what I've been thinking. Like, I've been going deep into Nietzsche lately, and I'll probably, when I get some free time in 30 years, I'll probably... I don't know, man. I guess December I'll have some free time, but like, my next plan is to write a paper on like what anarchists and libertarians and agorists can learn from Nietzsche. And Nietzsche has this concept of masters and slaves, right? And he doesn't mean that literally. He means, like, there are master types and there are slave types, right? And the core thing that makes a slave type is they live in reaction to others. You know, they don't have any genuine responses because everything is a response to an action someone else took towards them. Mm-hmm. And part of that is, okay, I have a good way to connect a lot of this. So part of what makes the state so pernicious is that in a lot of things we do, we cannot we can't help but live in reaction to the state. Like, you can't help but live in reaction to taxes that you need to pay, or else you'll go to prison and you won't be of any use, right? Mm-hmm. Or probably won't be of any use, to furthering liberty.
Right, unless you smuggle an M16 up your anus.
Yeah. Well, maybe you, not me.
You'll die. You'll die.
Yeah. Well,
someone tried that.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Ouch. But and what made me say may not be of use is because it's sick that it's worked out this way, but you have to admit that the fact that Ross Ulbricht is in prison for creating a website is doing something to open people's eyes,
Yeah, that's true.
The same with Duncan Lemp, it's just disgusting. And
murder.
The murder of Duncan Lemp, right? It requires a response from people when they hear of that story. So I think that
I was just going to say, plus when you're in prison, you get to beat pedophiles. So
that's right. So there's always an upside. There's an upside to most things.
That's right.
But so back to what I was saying was I got off topic, but the state requires a response in many different avenues, if not every facet of your life, right? Even if you want to homeschool your kids, there's state paperwork you have to do because that's not the natural or that's not the default assumption, right? The default assumption is they're going to go to a public school in their district.
Right.
So the state in some ways forces people to live like a slave type. And so this goes back to dropping out. Being a master type is not living in accordance to someone else or in reaction to someone or something else. It is making conscious decisions that are individual in nature and understood, right? You have clear reasons for it, and you can delineate those reasons through your own actions, wishes, and desires, and the other thing about Nietzsche is nothing is black and white, right? I'm thinking I want to move from Louisiana, and I want to move to Louisiana so that I can I want to move away from Louisiana so I can be more autonomous. So my goal is to be more of a master type, but that wish is somewhat rooted in a slave type reaction. I'm reacting to the weird laws in Louisiana, and I'm reacting in partly to the weather, but that's a whole nother thing. But then I'm reacting to the politics and the local politics and the state politics, and I'm thinking of a future where it may be more difficult to get to people in Idaho, or it may be more difficult for the federal government to knock on your door saying, "Hey, you haven't paid your taxes," in Idaho or Utah or Montana than it would be in Louisiana.
Yeah.
So I in some ways I am, and this is a Nietzschean idea. I mean, he outlines this and says this is a valid method, but to get to be a master or more masterly, you do sometimes have to go through or use slave-like means to get to a masterly end.
Well, I think so. What I'm going to try to do here is tie in that slave and master concept, or slave and master types, right? That concept in with something that you and also Dexter, Dogman Respecter, right?
Yeah.
Have talked about, which is homesteading your mind, right?
Yeah.
And then also there's something that Monica Perez said a while back. But what the state has done is when it's not educates but has your kids in school, right? It creates people that they get a stimulus and it's immediate reaction, right? And it's not like that stimulus isn't like, I'm not talking about like, okay, I'm swinging my hand at your face very quickly, right? I'm going to slap you. And that type of reaction where it's like a quick involuntary movement, right? I'm talking about you see something on the news, right? And then you have a reaction. But what you want in between that stimulus and reaction is, some sort of thought process, some sort of critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if you want to fit that into the Nietzschean concept, like that's like a slave does not have that, right? It's stimulus reaction. But, a master, like you can't avoid that stimulus and you can't avoid the reaction. But the difference is that you have that in-between step, that in-between process where it's, I'm going to think about this for a little bit,
Yeah.
I'm not going to react blindly or just like an involuntary type of deal,
Yeah.
And it's important to homestead your mind so that you're not that type, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To people listening, I suggest, if you haven't already, go back and listen to episode 38 where we had Dexter on, and that's where we came up with that homestead your own mind thing. And like similar to what you're talking about, in that survival podcast episode I shared under that tweet the other day.
Yeah.
He talks about, I think it's in that episode, where he talks about like you gotta recode your own mind, right? He talks about like the difference between being trained and being taught, where when you're being trained, you're being conditioned, where there's a certain stimulus, you're being conditioned to react a certain way. And I think that's a hell of a lot in politics. And he makes that point too, where people are conditioned to hate liberals no matter what. And liberals are trained in the inverse. But teaching is different, like your trained responses, but then you're taught concepts and you're taught to think methodologically, right? You're not trained to. It's like, I don't know, and it's not. It's like logic isn't really trained. Logic is taught, and because every situation you'll use logic in is not like the other. The other, like a different situation. Everything is like infinitely differently complex. Every situation that you would use logic in, so you're taught to apply a certain framework to something. And I think. Obviously, I don't even think many people outside of like our group would argue with this, but like schools train, and they're trained. And here's a good example that people outside of our group may disagree with, but in school, at least for me, I don't know what it's like nowadays, but we were trained to hold a massive amount of reverence for the American flag.
Yeah.
And like I had the same thing in Boy Scouts, because I was in Boy Scouts too. And like I remember how many times we had flag burnings, where we went through all the motions to have like a ethical flag burning, And I'm thinking like, what? Like I recognize that objects can hold reverence, Like, I mean, like a grave is a good example. Like there's some things that would be incredibly disrespectful to do in a graveyard, but or like a church is another example. But like it's never like we can rationalize that, but we can't really rationalize the flag stuff, man. Like what's the deal? Like if you have a flag T-shirt, are you gonna not throw it away? Are you gonna go through all the motions when it gets too raggedy to wear? But then again, I'm applying a framework that I've learned that was trained, or I was not trained to do this, And man, and then there are people that are trained to do the opposite. There are people that are trained to when something that happens they don't like, to go out into the street and burn and piss on American flags.
Yeah.
So the opposite is true both ways.
Yeah, all right-wing pro-flag, burn my flag, I'll stomp your ass arguments are purely emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And that's training. That's not, we're going to run through this, rationale of why we can't burn flags, Yeah. It's just training.
Yeah. And maybe we can talk a bit as a closer. And I make this point in the paper that what we've been talking about, sadly, is a bit pessimistic, right? Like,
yeah, a little bit, I'd say.
Yeah, like there are two things that we have to consider. We have to consider the possibility that freedom will not be attained in our lifetime. And then the second thing is in that where freedom largely is not attained, right? It is always being fought for. And that's part of the reasons why I love the movie Braveheart so much, because he makes that point in the movie. Like the when his buddies get down because they feel like they're not going to beat the British, William Wallace says, "Well, man, you don't think that we found freedom in fighting the British? Like what's your goals here, And that's part of the reason why I really like that movie and I love that message. But I gotta say why I like that message. You can say, well, I don't agree with anything Cotton and Zero are saying because they don't believe that freedom can be attained in so many words. They don't believe that is an end in itself,
Right.
Well, that's correct. But I don't think, like, when has there ever been an end, Like what? And I think this is a big issue with the people that like solely use economics as their tactic for attaining liberty, is so much of like Austrian theory and so much of what Rothbard and Hoppe wrote, and I love both those men. I love their writings. Like so much of what they wrote was like how everything will be so great in Ancapistan,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And no, that's not the case. Like life and history is just a story of trial and error,
Mm-hmm.
with new problems cropping up constantly and new solutions having to be tried to fix those problems. So this is probably, to me, the hardest sell, and so I'm having a hard time vocalizing it. But I think that the answer is not what the end would look like. I think the answer is mostly in the ethic, like what's going to be the means, like
Mm-hmm.
how do we act now, without even thinking about what 50 years is going to look like necessarily. But I think people pay too much attention to the future where they roll now under the bus. And I don't mean like, I'm not saying you should have a high time preference, because I know people are going to think that, but like what I'm saying is, don't sacrifice your principle to vote for Joe Jorgensen. Because that is because you think it will attain Ancapistan, because it's not. And I think in that is because you're sacrificing your principle in step A, that naturally step B isn't going to be in line with that principle, because you've already given it up, you know, or already given up principles. So I think that's a bit of pessimism when you approach these conclusions from the framework that historically we've had. So I think, and this is the end of my thought. So like now I'm already, I've walked down the path a bit, the new path. I've walked down a bit, and I've given you the history of the new path, and I'm up to where I am at the moment. So, what do you think of that?
I like how you kind of ended that, where you're talking about how the answer is, oh shoot, battery low. All right, how the answer is in how you live your life now, rather than, you know, how it's gonna end up.
Yeah.
Or how the future for all of us is going to end up. Right. And it kind of, it goes back to what we were saying, with you can't worry about stuff that you can't control. And yeah, you just, you have to be consistent, you know? Yeah. And if you're not consistent and you sacrifice those principles, then yeah, it's not going to work out the way that you think that you think it will, because pragmatists have convinced you otherwise, or whatever, right?
Yeah. So before we close, I want to just kind of give like a recommended reading / watching section to this.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, Braveheart. Also, I really recommend watching. Oh, before we started recording, I tweeted it. I tweeted like movies I had in mind that I thought were really, really good summations of what we've been saying. Okay.
Oh, real quick.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something that you can believe, okay? Not something you can't believe, but something you can believe. I've never watched Braveheart.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But it's on the list. It's on the list.
You got to do it. It's long, but it's so worth it. Oh yeah, it's over 3 hours.
Dang.
Another movie that's really good to from an anarchist mindset is Fight Club, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Another one, and I don't know if you've seen this, is Dances with Wolves.
No, I have not seen that one.
Oh man, that's really good. That's probably, Dances with Wolves might be my favorite movie if it were not for the next movie, which is Shawshank Redemption. I love that movie.
Such a good movie.
And then let me see here. I had some reading I've been doing. Like again, I've been doing Nietzsche, like in particular Beyond Good and Evil, and Genealogy of Morals, or Genealogy of Morality. I don't remember the exact title. I don't have the book in front of me. And yeah, join our Discord. And I'm probably also, please consider donating to the Patreon. We publish all the episodes early there, plus some bonus episodes every now and again.
Give us your monies.
Yes, please give us your monies. It helps a lot. But I might read this article I wrote for like a little bonus thing on the Patreon, because I don't know when or if it's going to be published. If it doesn't get published where I'm workshopping it, then I'll put it on the Cotton Report website. So yeah, that's all I got to say as a closer.
Yeah, and all I have to say really is that I was really disappointed in myself that instead of introducing Dark Tom Woods as our special guest. I totally flubbed it. Like 90 seconds after that, I was like, oh man, I really should have introduced Dark Tom Woods.
Man, he's got his hands in so many things.
He does.
Like he co-hosts like pretty much every Liberty podcast. You ever think about that?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's got to be. I don't know if he's like just he's a multiplicity. Like he's got. I don't know. He's like Dark Tom Woods is the plurality of Liberty podcast hosts. I don't know.
Yes.
Or he's just got like a bunch of tentacles. And he's got like 10 computers around him, and he's always hacking and doing all sorts of stuff.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that must be why it took us 2 weeks to record that episode that's gonna come out after this one.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah. He had to do it though. That's what he told me. Said I got to do it. That's what I do. Wouldn't
he is
be
Dark
a
Tom
Dark
Woods
Tom
after
Woods.
all.
Exactly. All right, man. Are you ready to wrap this up?
Sure. And with that, I am Liberty Zero, reminding you to zero your rifle.
And I'm Cotton Archist, reminding you to pick cotton voluntarily.